having me here today. My name is Abdallah Twaiqat. I'm from JoPACC, Jordan. Currently, I'm the Chief Information Officer and Software Development Lead for JoPACC. Just a quick introduction for JoPACC. JoPACC is the owner and the operator of the financial market infrastructure here in Jordan from payment perspective. So we owns all the clearing houses mainly in Jordan, such as our instant payment solution, which is called Click. We have our electronic bill and presentment and payment system. We have our electronic check clearing house. We have our ACH for mainly to target the enterprises and corporates for transfers. So we are considered the executive arm for Central Bank of Jordan. So JoPACC is 55% owned by the commercial banks in Jordan and 45% from Central Bank of Jordan. And we are helping all of our stakeholders here in Jordan to develop and enhance all services for payments, KYC, fraud detection and prevention, ML, CFT, many other topics. We have, to be honest, multiple options or topics to discuss here today. And for me, I prefer to introduce you to our Jordan Open Finance implementation. And we will walk it together, how we have done that, how we have implemented our services, our APIs, and all of that. I hope that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Good, all is good. Perfect. For today's session, we will discuss open banking versus open payment. Just a quick question before I start. I believe most of us have a technical background, correct? Or from different domains?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Anyone here is familiar with open banking, open finance implementations in general? Okay. So we will start with open banking versus open payments or open finance. Value proposition and use cases. This is one of our most important topic, the world of open banking and open finance initiatives. Then we will go through our Jordan's implementation for the Jordan open banking and open finance APIs and standards. And we might take a look at our sandbox, how we are doing that, how we are helping the market to start this initiative. And if we had some time, I would love to give you a quick introduction for one of our, let's say, latest implementations based on that, which is the digital transformation for a trade finance services from the banks called letter of guarantees, where most of it was paper-based and with a huge headache for the banks on operational level and the compliance and the regulatory aspects to be compliant with Central Bank of Jordan requirements. Even if I have a IT or technical background, what usually in JoPACC here, we dig very deep on the business aspect of our implementations, how we can do that and all those stuff. But first of all, I would like to talk about the journey, how everything started, why we have started late, how we benefited from starting late, to be honest, on a global scale. Everything actually started with a vision of economic modernization, which was, let's say, introduced by our King Abdallah II here in Jordan to enhance our, to move forward to reach our digital economy. So in that vision, we have set it, let's say, our what we need to do to reach that point of to reach our digital economy and convert from a paper-based or fiat currencies to reach that digital economy on all levels. After that, in November, Central Bank of Jordan issued the instructions to regulate the open finance services. The first thing happened in Jordan, let's say, or the first outcome from the vision of economic modernization was the instructions from Central Bank of Jordan. Those instructions now under revision. It was very generic for the implementation itself and how the banks need to do it, what they need to do, but in a generic way, let's say. But here in JoPACC, we have started to dig deep in open finance a long time ago, before even the vision of economic modernization. So after Corona, we have started to because during COVID, we have started to let's say share the data between our financial institutions, so we can benefit to the maximum from sharing those data. And during the COVID, we have noticed that we have a problem in the standardization between the banks, how we should do it, how everyone should do it to create that, let's say, that sort of interoperability between all financial institutions. And we have made a proof of concept here in JoPACC locally. So we used to have a data set from some of our financial institutions to describe the ATMs where the refugees here in Jordan can cash out, let's say, from their aids from those ATMs based on the distance. So those are the nearest ATMs from refugee camps and all of that. From that data set, we have tried to understand better how to standardize the ATMs, for example, and to create an open banking, open finance APIs to describe the ATMs from the financial institutions to be shared between the financial institutions and the fintech startups once we have fintech startups. And it was very successful proof of concept where you can utilize our JoPACC website to list what type of ATMs that you are trying to reach, let's say the minimum currency that can be extracted from that specific ATM, and many other properties that can be controlled while filtering or searching for the best fit, let's say, ATM. And from there we have took it, let's say. After that, JoPACC launched our Jordan FinTech Innovation Incubation Program, and that's why we call it FinCubator, because it's joint stands for Jordan Innovation, and FinCubator stands for the FinTech Incubation or Incubator. And in the same dates, Central Bank of Jordan launched the JoReg Box, which is the Central Bank of Jordan regulatory sandbox. And please, if you need to know anything more about any specific word or topic, please ask me, interrupt me. We can make it as much interactive as we can. So Join FinCubator is our JoPACC incubation program targeting the fintech startups. We have noticed that we have multiple incubation programs here in Jordan, but none of them is specialized in fintech. As a JoPACC, we took that liability, so we can push our King's vision, let's say, to its goal, to achieve those goals. So we have started that incubation program where we will receive the applications from the startups. We validate the idea. We are targeting the idea stage. So we will validate the idea, provide them with expertise, infrastructure, access to banks and financial institutions, legal compliance. We will provide them with all tools that can support them to go live with their products and to support our economy and employment rate here in Jordan. And then we have launched our first hackathon targeting the MSMEs with the help with one of our partners, which is the GIZ from Germany, to increase the financial inclusion rates for the micro and small and medium enterprises here in Jordan. And most of our economy and, let's say, landscape for the enterprises here in Jordan consists out of the micro and small and medium enterprises. That's why we have targeted that specific segment in the first phase. In 2023, we have gathered, let's say, the Jordanian banks to start our Jordan Open Finance Specifications Task Force. We'll discuss it in a bit. Now, for the era of data, everything nowadays is about data. The amount of data that you have, the amount of data that you can handle, that you can understand, is the key to keep pushing the digital transformation or the transformation journey, and to understand your current position and how you can enhance it better. So open banking is about only account aggregation and payment initiation. So we are talking about a small segment of the services that can be, which is being provided by the banks. Alex, we have Alex now.
Apologies, the other call ran late. Yes, you have my
It's
fullest of
okay.
attention. You know what I realized? What this slide really misses? Another section before open banking that is open payment. So it's like open payments, open banking, open finance, open data. So open payments sits at the foundation for all of these things.
Maybe we will discuss it in a little bit. Once I show them our sandbox, we might see how open payments impacted our payment initiation services and how it enhanced, let's say, our specifications specifically for payment initiation services. We might add it in the future, let's say. Okay, then
very Jordanian answer. Very Jordanian answer.
So after open banking, there's open finance, where we largening our scope, let's say, to additional services from the banking industry in general to reach insurance, mortgages, customer credit, investments, professional financial management, credit assessment, and all of that. And based on our legislation, because everything started from there, Central Bank of Jordan is targeting the open finance. So we need to define our scope better to understand how we should implement our open APIs for that. And our ultimate goal, based on our King's vision, is to reach the open data, where to connect everything, all the dots together from different industries, so we can reach a digital economy at the end, which is our ultimate goal here in Jordan. Our value proposition, this is very important for us, especially because once we discuss this with the banks, why the banks needs to implement the open finance. This is a global dilemma, let's say. The banks will never be, let's say, they hate the competition with the fintechs, let's say, because some of the fintechs globally, or the startups directly that might impact their business, and we have seen that. We have seen many banks currently started as a fintechs and started to be one of the biggest banks or globally, let's say. So that's why we need the mandate from Central Bank of Jordan. Based on the legislations and instructions from Central Bank of Jordan, the implementation is mandated. And this is what we call a regulatory-driven implementation. So if the regulator mandated the implementation with the specifications, this is a regulatory-led, and we will discuss it in a little bit. So the first value for the banks is the compliance. You have to be compliant with the instructions of Central Bank of Jordan. But what might be valuable for the banks from a business perspective on them directly is an improved digital agility. So the startups have a higher agility than the banks, and this will improve the digital agility for the banks themselves. Premium APIs, and we will discuss it in a little bit. For example, the implementation that we can see in, for example, Singapore. Singapore, you can see one of the biggest banks there have, for example, 10 APIs are free, but they have 100 APIs as a premium APIs, where the banks there started to generate a profit and to consider it as a profit stream from those APIs specifically. After that, we can see an increased customer satisfaction because all the trends from, let's say, open banking, open finance are provided for their customers directly from the startups. So their customers will not left behind for those APIs, for those services. Potential for collaboration, and we have seen this a lot here in Jordan. Once there's a good startup, especially in fintech, start to move forward here in Jordan, most of the banks tries to have a piece of that pie. Let's say they want to cut from that startup, and they will collaborate with them financially and from an operational perspective, even not just the APIs or to open the environment for them. And they will also invest with those in those startups. And most of our Jordanian banks have their own, let's say, innovation hubs internally in those financial institutions, and they are accelerating and incubating some of the best startups here in Jordan. They got launched to the market directly from the banking sector by being incubated and accelerated by one of the banks. The biggest one here is Jordan. We have the ABX, which is the Arab Bank Accelerator. Arab Bank is one of the biggest banks in the region and have a global presence, and they have their own innovation hub, and they have their own accelerator for the startups. This year, for example, their focus was on artificial intelligence and not tied only to the banking industry. So they can support and invest in startups that utilizes or based on artificial intelligence, generative AI, and all of that. They will contribute with that and support them. Wider client based, as we all know, most of the customers will start to be included in the financial system based on needs and how their needs are being fulfilled from the banks and the startups. They will start to move forward to be included and to be supported by this ecosystem in general. Opportunities, but sorry, I can't see the. Okay, sorry. Okay, for opportunities from a different level, especially from, let's say, on the government side or the Central Bank of Jordan side, we have the higher financial inclusion rates. We have the economic growth and collaboration, consumer empowerment and innovation and competition. And this is, we are seeing that currently in Jordan based on the current implementation and all of that. But it comes with a lot of risks. We have the data privacy and security concerns. We have regulatory challenges. We have trust and transparency. Unequal access and the digital divide. We might discuss some of them while explaining the implementations on a global scale. We might discuss some of them. And we need to tackle from our side, even JoPACC, where once we launched the task force, we started to tackle each and every concern from regulatory and from risk perspectives one by one, so we can ensure that we are creating an inclusive and robust ecosystem for all financial for all banks or PSPs and PSPs, all of that for and even these startups, so we can we have included them in our let's say assessment while developing the specifications itself. The world of open finance, this is a little bit old. It's much higher nowadays, but based on the last time I have checked, we have like more than 4,300 banks have implemented the open finance, open banking and open finance. We have more than 100 plus use cases. We have 460 TPPs, third-party providers. This is a little bit old number. Now it's much higher than that. 73 countries are supporting the open finance and open banking. And this is a huge number, to be honest. Even on the day that I have extracted those numbers, there is a global, let's say, acceptance and empowerment for the open banking, open finance to support their economy, all the new startups, because they know one startup, if it's reached that point of to be a unicorn that can provide hundreds and hundreds of jobs for unemployed, and it can push the economy for all countries. So once you have a good and robust, let's say, environment for startups, and especially in fintech, it will provide you a lot of benefits on the national level. For the aggregators, until now, we have, let's say, on a global scale, we have let's say, a problem with defining the word of aggregator. The first time I have read that terminology, it used to be to mean that startups that can connect you to different standards on a global level. But so, for example, we have UK standard, we have EU standard, we have Singapore standard, we have USA standard, we have many different standards. So the diversity, let's say, on the implementations have created some sort of new businesses, such as the aggregator, which is a company that can connect you to different standards on a global scale. But currently, the definition have changed. The aggregators nowadays are being used for entities that can give you access to all financial institutions on a national scale or on even a global scale directly by connecting to those aggregators. So now the definition for it have been changed, and we will discuss it a little bit on implementations. We will see different different types of implementations, let's say. Now, for the biggest topic while discussing open banking, open finance, it's a little bit tricky slide, but I hope that I can explain it in a good manner. For the initiatives for open banking, open finance, usually the implementations on global scale are being differentiated based on the scope. As we have started on the first slide, we have open banking, we have open finance. So this is the first type of differentiation between the implementations. But the most critical element to differentiate between implementations globally is the initiative. If central banks mandated the implementation, enforce the implementations with the specifications, so technical specifications, APIs, open APIs specifications, we call that regulatory driven. So the regulator will drive the implementation and enforce it and monitor it on a national scale. But we have different implementations. For example, we have Switzerland and New Zealand, for example. They have open payments, open banking implementation, but it was industry driven. And we have seen that, for example, usually the banks will make some sort of consortium, the biggest banks. They will set the specifications for themselves. Anyone want to connect with this for directly to one of the banks in this consortium, he's going to utilize those APIs specifications. And we have actually a huge problem with that type of implementations. The problem is the scattered implementation. So if every 10 different banks made a consortium for their implementation, or even the banks decided their standard one by one, such as Singapore, for example, then the startups will face a huge problem while connecting to those banks by implementing proprietary, let's say, standard for each and every bank with a different standards, different data structures. And most of us have a technical background, so we know the problem with such thing. And we have currently USA considered and industry driven, but now they are studying a legislation and the law for unifying the implementation in USA to minimize the efforts for the startups and the developers in their case. And for example, Singapore, they have a directory. So the Monetary Authority of Singapore created some sort of directory where you can access and you can check all the specifications for the banks that have implemented open banking, open finance APIs in Singapore. But you have to check them one by one. We have done that. It's pretty complicated. It's not an easy thing to do. That's why we can consider the Jordan's implementation a little bit different. So Central Bank of Jordan have mandated the implementations on the bank. So from that perspective, we are considered a regulatory driven. But Central Bank of Jordan did not mandated the specifications on the bank. And that's where JoPACC jumped in the implementation. We have gathered the task force from the Jordanian banks, the banks that have the highest, let's say, maturity levels from a technical perspective. So they have gateways, they have the proper or the needed infrastructure from their side. And we have started to discuss how we can implement that, how we can implement those APIs. And we have agreed to create our own directory by implementing our own APIs on our own standard. But this API is called Jordan Open Finance Specification. It's not JoPACC, it's not one of the banks, so it's Jordan Open finance specifications, and all the banks in Jordan will implement and agreed, let's say, to implement those APIs. So if one of the startups here in Jordan connected to one bank, he needs only one development process, then he can integrate directly to all banks in Jordan only by implementing those APIs only once. Here, I would like to discuss the Turkish model from Turkey. Now, JoPACC, with the task force in Jordan, we have tried to implement these specifications. But based on Central Bank of Jordan instructions, each and every bank need to assess the startup that wants to extract the data from systems and from their end individually. So they need to build some sort of risk matrix for that startup. And this risk matrix might be variant between banks. So it depends on their risk appetite, their understanding for the business model, the use cases from that specific startup. They might allow their access to their environment or to block it. In Turkey, they have a different model. So they have started a new company or a new party. I believe it's also under Central Bank of Turkey. So the startup needs only to sign one agreement with that institution, then he will get access to all financial institutions in Turkey. I can't say that I am against that. This is a very comprehensive model to implement, but the problem with that implementation specifically is the risk, let's say, the liability framework. So this institution will validate the use cases for the startup, their business model, their from cybersecurity, from information security, from infrastructure level, from all levels. Then they will approve it and they will sign the agreement with them. But who's going to be liable in case of anything happened with the customers' data, with the startup itself, if any breach happens on the bank side? So we are shifting the liability when it comes to reality from the banks, who's the owner of the data, who's the liable for the data, to that institution, and it will take all the liability. It's much faster to implement, to boost the ecosystem implementation, but the liability is very high and the risk is very high in that institution. That's why in JoPACC we have tried to be an aggregator. As you need to connect only once to JoPACC. We will onboard you from a technical level, let's say, but you need the agreements to be signed directly and to be approved directly by the banks. So it's only about logistics, but when it comes to the implementation for the specifications, the connectivity, the implementation, let's say, of the security requirements, consent requirements, JoPACC will take care about that for all banks in Jordan. And because JoPACC has its own, let's say, secured network between JoPACC and the banks, we are minimizing the exposure of the banks on, let's say, internet, for example, which is, they are already exposed because they have mobile applications, mobile banking, but consider JoPACC as a policy enforcement layer in the middle between the startups and the banks, and consider us as additional protection layer between them. But we have stopped that currently because we have some private companies, they say, wants to play that role and to be aggregators in the Jordanian market, and JoPACC will never compete with the companies here in Jordan, because if JoPACC wants to play that role, all banks will follow JoPACC because we are trusted by the banks. We have our financial systems and we are owned actually by the banks. So if JoPACC wants to play that role and to compete with the private market, we will win that fight, let's say. So that's why we have stopped, and we left it for the private companies and new startups, new companies here in Jordan to play that role. Now, what we are seeking after, why we are doing all of that, why we have been doing that for the last 3 years, I think. All of that because we are trying to reach an inclusive ecosystem and inclusive financial ecosystem to reach at the end our main goal, which is the digital economy. And how we are doing that? We are following those steps that you are seeing. We will start with an assessment. Then we will define our inclusion criteria. This is one of the most critical parts while developing, let's say, open banking, open finance, because it's obvious from the name. Let's say it's called open banking, but what if I do not have a bank account? Should I be included in this implementation or in this ecosystem, or I'm gonna be left behind? So if we call it only open banking for bank accounts and payment initiation, we have left most of the Jordanians out of the ecosystem. So we need to define our inclusion criteria very carefully, that we should not exclude anyone from the development process. Then we will start with developing regulatory guidelines, which is we are helping, let's say, or advising our Central Bank of Jordan how to do that. What are the problems that we are facing? What are the problems that the banks are facing, and all of that. Sorry. What just happened? Okay. Then we need to define, this is what here's JoPACC comes, define the technical specifications, provide guidance and support and monitoring, enforcement and updates. So we are taking, let's say, the last three, but we are also helping in the first three. This is our main goal, and this is what we are trying to do. On a global scale, global implementations, usually once we say open banking, open finance, the market infrastructure consists of three different pillars, let's say. The first one is the third-party management, who's going to manage all the startups and the third-party providers. We have the standards, which is the open API specifications, all of that. And we have the value-added services. So what are the services going to be implemented? What we will start with? What are the use cases that we want to focus on? And all of that. In Jordan, we do it in a different way. In Jordan, first of all, we have started with the Jordan Open Finance design principles. Those design principles, because such projects usually take like 10 years of development. It's a continuous development effort. So we need some sort of guidelines or a North Star, let's say, to be followed by everyone. So at any point of time, if you want to add or to enhance the services, you know how to do that. And from there, we have took it. So we started our third-party management. And that's why we have created our joint Thinkubator. So it's not just simply a sandbox. It's one of our, let's say, strategic projects here in Jordan and JoPACC. So to support all of the third-party providers and to manage them in a good way, so we can push them and help them to move forward to go live in our market. As you can see here, you can see JoPACC as aggregator, and currently we have stopped that. And the third party is to be managed by the banks, because as we have said, the inclusion criteria is very important. What if there's a specific TPP, for example, want to implement a specific use case with one specific bank or financial institution? How we can implement the standard? Should we add the needed APIs from his side and from his banks only for him? Is that it's not a logical, or from our task force, even from JoPACC perspective, we should not do that. It's only very, very niche and very specific use case with only one bank. So we have standardized we have mandated, let's say not mandated. In our standards, we have two options. So the third-party providers, TPPs, startups can connect directly to the aggregator with the Jordan Open Finance specifications, and they can go directly to the banks. So we have two options, either with the aggregator or with the banks, and the banks should be able to support both options or the financial institutions, not only the banks. So we have supported both options to guarantee the, let's say, inclusivity of our, the inclusion, let's say, of all stakeholders for all needs. Then we have the consent management. We have the consent key elements industry standard and industry specific standard. In our initial, let's say, proposal from JoPACC, we have tried to stay away from the consent management because on a global scale, from different implementations, we have learned that what is differentiating between the financial institutions, once you are implementing a market-led and a market-agreed specifications, will be the user experience between the financial institutions themselves and even the startups and third-party providers. So we have tried to keep that freedom for the banks and financial institutions to implement it in the way that they see it better for their customers, to give them that agility, let's say, in the implementation. That's why we have tried to stay away from that. But the task force asked us to contribute with them, to help them to implement the customer consent. We will discuss it in a little bit. For the standards, we have actually four different categories. But we have not only the APIs that we have standardized, we have also standardized the security. We have guaranteed the interoperability between the financial institutions with different types and the APIs, future-proof and continuous for the development level. And this is our roadmap that we have followed while implementing our Jordan Open Finance specification. So we have started with our design principles, our main building block. Then we have moved forward to consent management and open API specifications. And we are currently following up with the banks to start the phased implementation, to start with facilities, product, and services, which is the publicly accessible data from the banks, so we can push forward the implementation here in Jordan further. For our design principles, we have 7 or 8 design principles. Sorry. We have started with the collaboration with the market. So in the collaboration with the market, we have, because as I've said, we are from a implementation perspective, we are industry driven. So because that's why we have a Jordan Open Finance task force to decide how it should be implemented and all of that. That's why this is our main cornerstone, our main building block while talking about our design principles. Then we have chose, let's say, RESTful APIs to make it, let's say, a little bit loose and contractual-less. I don't know how to spell it one more time, but it's RESTful APIs. The interoperability is guaranteed by design. So we have set the guidelines for the technical and semantic interoperability, and we have set the guidelines to achieve the business interoperability. And it's a pretty tricky between both of them. As you know, usually once we discuss interoperability, we are talking about the traditional pyramid, let's say, of interoperability. You have the connectivity, you have which is the physical layer or connectivity, you have syntax and semantics and the business layer. From a connectivity perspective, we have all options. You can do whatever you want. It's not mandated for the banks or mandated on the startups to utilize a specific connection with them. But from the difference between semantics and business, so for example, you might have seen that, but for example, if I'm saying this is an account, the account definition in the banking institutions is a little bit different from the, for example, payment service providers, MPSPs, for example, mobile payment service providers. So we have tried to guarantee, even if from a technical perspective, from a specification perspective, both of them have the same key, but from business perspective, it's a little bit different. So we have tried to define how to guarantee the interoperability on those 3 levels: technical, semantic, and the business aspect for the interoperability. For the continuous development, we are supporting versioning and all of that, future-proof and extensible design. And how we have done that? In Jordan, we have followed the complex types, simple types, data structures. So for the accounts, in all of our APIs, it have the same definition. It have the same data structure. It have the same data elements. So we have minimized, and from that perspective, we have minimized, let's say, the efforts on the developer. Usually, once you are trying to develop the specifications for open banking, open finance, you have three different, let's say, sides for it or perspectives. It's either the bank's perspective, it's either the developer perspective, it's either the infrastructure perspective. Three different perspectives that you need to take care of. I can give you an example. For example, in UK standard, they have followed the flattened data object to minimize the efforts on the developer. So it was a developer first design choice. It's simply a design choice. It wouldn't make any difference, but on the developer side, it might be more simpler for them to utilize a flattened data structure. If you are checking what type of data that should be extracted or passed, or the responses from the APIs, then you are checking the, let's say, bank's first aspect. Because if the banks does not have that data, what do they need to do? How much of efforts they need to put on that implementation to guarantee that all of their data is there, cleansed, clean, and can be retrieved by the TPPs. So you need to understand the current infrastructure for the banks, so you can make the implementation easier for them. Then you have the infrastructure. So for example, in Jordan, we have systems that support ISO 222. We have systems that supports proprietary standards, and also the banks side, they have MT standard, or the ISO 15022, which is the old standard from SWIFT, considered MT. And so we have three different types of standard on infrastructure level, or the financial infrastructure level. We need also to take care of. So once you are trying to build your specifications, you cannot forget about the proprietary standards, and you cannot leave behind the MT standard or the ISO 15022. And you cannot only just to utilize the ISO 222s, such in UK implementation. They are ISO 222 compliant, or they have took care or considered the ISO 222 while implementing their services. But if I followed here in Jordan the same approach, will almost be impossible implementation for the Jordanian banks, because their internal systems and the infrastructure itself still supports the ISO 15022, the MT structure. So you need to balance between the three different aspects, or the first, who's first, I usually say about it, call it who's first. You have to find that balancing point between all of them. And this is in the fifth pillar from our side in the design principle, is the future-proof and extensible design. So most of the banks currently are migrating from the ISO 15022 MT structure to the ISO 222, the MX structure. So this is, by considering the ISO 222, we are trying to create that future-proof and the extensible design by choosing a flexible data objects from a technical perspective. So to make it more dynamic, to have that some sort of freedom, what type of keys that I should use, how to define the data structures. This might help you a lot while building your own specifications. Then we have the utilization. As I told you, you have utilization of Jordan Financial Market Specifications, ISO 222, MX, ISO 15022, MT, and the local standards. And if you are compliant with 222 or 20022, 15022, you will be covered and compliant with MXMT standards from SWIFT, and also the local standards. For security, it's only recommendations. We have recommended the best practices, but you cannot mandate the security, let's say, requirements, because it's keep changing. Usually, once we want to adapt some sort of security requirements for connectivity, for non-repudiation is different, but We usually utilize the terminology of the best practices, but you need to look up for the best practices because it keeps changing, and so we do not need to change our operating rules, our guidelines for them, but we have set some guidelines how to implement that. For the consent management, we have checked the industry standards and industry specific standards, and we might see it in the upcoming slides. Okay, we will discuss only about the consent management because you have a very unique implementation on the consent level, especially for industry standards. We have gave the banks some guidelines and recommendations for the customer consent key elements or the journey for the customers. So without unifying, let's say, the journey for the customers, we have unified, let's say, the full journey. Because you have seen that, you might have seen that for some implementations. So for example, EU, UK, Saudi now, UAE, most of implementations, they will provide the financial institutions with, let's say, screens for the application, how the journey will be moved, will be for the customers. We do not prefer to do that. We have left that for the banks to compete in that specific domain, but we have set the key elements for the customer consent by user acquisition, granularity, consent lifecycle management, consent revocation and withdrawal, and consent auditing and reporting, and privacy and data protection. We have tried to provide a generic guidelines for the banks how to implement the consent management key elements. For the standard itself, we have checked OAuth 2 OpenID Connect. We have checked the financial data exchange, which is an industry specific standard. Just to differentiate between them, the industry standards are the global standards for customer consent, or the customer consent, without exposing the customer credentials. So we have OAuth 2 and we have OpenID Connect for identity tokens, and the OAuth 2 for the access tokens. Then some of the implementations for open banking, open finance enhance those, let's say, industry standards by adding some security elements and features and requirements on those standards. The most well-known, let's say, standard are FDX, FAPI requirements, next-gen BSD2 for EU, and UK open banking implementation entity. They have set it also a guidelines for that. So we have checked all of that. And after that, we got introduced to GNAP, whatever it calls, by Alex.
Wait, does the color mean they're using those? Like the Berlin group and the open banking implementation using GNAP now?
No, this is what we have checked. But all of them are using OAuth 2 OpenID Connect with some extra, let's say, security features. So it's mandated to implement some other security features because they have found some vulnerabilities on the original protocol, and by adding those security features, they will minimize the risk of vulnerabilities in this case. And that's it. Then we got introduced to GNAP, which is I believe, the future of customer consent protocols from a technical perspective. It's huge. It's very nice. The most advanced. Will give you the, let's say, the full agility and the full potential of customer consent granting process and how it should be taken from the customer. For Jordan implementation, we have decided to go with OAuth 2 OpenID Connect. Currently, in this stage, we do not need, when it comes to reality, we do not need the identity token from OpenID Connect, but we have preferred to mandate it on the bank because they wanted our mandate. We have mandated on the banks to be future-proof if we need the identity token in the future, and we are implementing the same headers from FABI. So, but instead of calling it FABI, we call it X, just not to have that mandate to be certified or anything from that. From there, those are the global implementations that we have checked while building our specifications. As we know, it's called financial industry or the banking industry. It is an industry. It have guidelines, it have regulations, it have, so it just like any other different industry. You need to learn those basics so you can support open banking, open finance implementation. And we also checked global implementations. We have checked Berlin Group, Next Gen BSD2. We have checked UK Standard Open Banking Project, which is an open source implementation for the UK for open finance, sorry. And they had with UK Standard. And to be honest, UK Standard is the worst standard in the world, but it's the first one. So that's why it's the reference implementation for everyone. But to be honest, I hate it. Yeah, I just hate it. We have checked Danske Group, especially for their premium APIs. They have very good premium APIs. And they have also UK and BSD2 APIs. We have checked the Monetary Authority of Singapore, Financial Industry API Register, which is the library, let's say, or directory for the APIs in Singapore. And we have checked the Polish PAPI also for the premium APIs implementation. We have checked all of that, and we have made consultations with our Jordanian banks. Then we have started to build our APIs. What else? This will not be enough. Many other aspects and considerations must be made while implementing open APIs in general. You need the most straightforward and direct one, which is the strong customer authentication. If you want to check that, just to give you how we have tackled this problem. First of all is data privacy and security, strong customer authentication, and that's it. Those are the main two key and the local requirements from your regulator. So we have checked BSD2, which is the most of the global implementation utilizing that, even it's not mandated, and I find that really weird. For example, we are implementing exactly BSD2 for strong customer authentication guidelines, but we are not mandated to do that. It's when it comes to reality, it might block some of the innovations, but you need to have a good care for it and to check that. In the beginning, we have checked GDPR because we knew that our data privacy law here in Jordan, it was under discussion in our parliament. So we knew that it will be the same because it's a hub and spoke. EU will regulate, we will follow. So we knew that it will be a copy from the GDPR. So we had checked that. And after the issuance of our local regulation for data privacy, we started to check that and to make sure that we are compliant with all of that. So it's not simply an APIs that will be exposed by the banks. It's a full ecosystem and full process that you need to really take care about it. And also there is a commercialization aspect, because if it's a market-led, you need to tackle that problem also with the banks. And also you have the fraud prevention and detection. Those are also aspects that you need to consider while developing the ecosystem. Because we have discussed the BSD2 and the UK and EU implementation, usually, if you check the implementation global level, you can see 3 different types or categories of APIs are implemented. You have the account information services, you have the payment initiation services, and you have the CAF, which is confirmation of availability of funds. And it was really a huge pain, the CAF. The CAF is mentioned in one of the not recommendations, instructions in the BSD2. And they did not really mention what it should be used for. The confirmation of availability of funds, simply, if you check the implementation, technical implementation, you will ask the financial institution if this specific customer have this blocked specific amount in his account. But it means nothing. It will reply with true or false. That's why here in Jordan, we have prepared to create our own categorization process, because as I told you, it's a hub and spoke. Everyone will follow the BSD2 UK implementation because it's the first. and the EU implementation. Our instructions by Central Bank of Jordan have two different licenses. Usually the categorization will be based on the license. So we have account information services, we have payment initiation service providers, and both based on those categories, you need a specific license. But we have noticed that our legislations or instructions from Central Bank of Jordan didn't mention publicly accessible data, for example. It's publicly accessible. It's already listed on the bank's websites. What about that? What about the extended services? Extended services, we have created that category to embed the services between our banks, to support the banks. So we are trying in our ecosystem to support not only the third-party providers, but also to support the banks. And we have just finished proof of concept with the banks for, as I told you, one of our biggest projects, and Alex may know about it, which is the electronic letter of guarantee here in Jordan. So we have
congratulations on that. I know it's been a
long
time in running it. Congratulations.
Thank you. Finally. But we have the account information services, which is derived directly from the legislations and instructions. We have the extended services, which is the services between the banks to enhance the ecosystem in general, the services to push the, let's say, implementation between the banks. We have the payment initiation services, and we have facilities, products, and services, which is the publicly accessible data from the bank side. Currently, we have many APIs. And this is a good comment. I will show you now our sandbox. I hope that you can see it. But on a global scale, one of the let's say in Jordan position or implementation, we have faced a really big problem that we didn't know what to implement, because usually in such implementations, you will study, let's say, or discuss the use cases that you want to implement, what you are trying to achieve. This is the whole idea. So you have a goal, you are trying to achieve that by utilizing the open data between the banks or financial institutions. In Jordan, it was a little bit different. We do not have a good visibility what the banks need, what the TPPs need, or the startups will need. So after checking most of the implementations on a global scale, we have decided to create some sort of initial set of APIs that we need to implement, which is the most generic, let's say, APIs. And from that point, we have created accounts APIs, balances APIs, beneficiaries, branches, confirmation of availability of funds, which comes under account information services. We have the fees from the banks. We have financial institutions. We have a foreign exchange, FX. We have IBAN confirmation service. We have some sort of additional APIs that can, let's say, consider it as will support the TPPs to learn how to implement our security standards and security requirements. So we have provided them, let's say, for the JSON Advanced Electronic Digital Signature on the baseline B level. We have the JWE, how to encrypt. We have implemented the standard for them, and so they can learn how to implement it from their side. So those are learning or playground for the startups, specifically for the security requirements from their side. We have the offers. We have one-time password. We have products and product tree. Under revision now, under request for comments from the community, we have extended services loans. This service will allow you to grant and request a loan and to be credited to your account directly through APIs from the startups or even from other banks. I don't know, it might happen from other financial institutions, let's say. For example, if one of the MPSPs, because they cannot give loans, currently they do not give loans, it might be also included in their channels. We have our also request for comments for our payment initiation services. We have self-terminal services. It's just like an ATMs, but it's much bigger. We have standing orders and scheduled payments. This is one of the weird, let's say, weird stuff. For example, if you checked most of the global implementations globally, you will find that they will differentiate between the standing orders and scheduled payments. but nobody knows why. It's absolutely the same thing. But the only difference between them, that the standing order is usually a one time. It's not scheduled. One time, it will be paid in a specific time, future value dated, but it's only for one time. But for the scheduled payments, it's a recurring payment. And why to have two different APIs for the same service? There's a good justification for that. It might impact the pricing for the TPP, but I believe if you want to unify it on a national level, it should be the same, and the banks should take the same amount or the same fees if it's a premium API. And this is the Central Bank of Jordan call to decide what are the premium APIs, or let's say what is the basic APIs that must be supported by the banks and should be free for the startups to push the implementation on the ecosystem. Also, we have transactions and webhooks and subscriptions because we have implemented webhooks in our case. If you want to check any of those APIs, I would be happily, we can check it together. How I can show you how we have implemented that. What are the, let's say, critical design choices that we have made in that specific API, for example, if you want. There's something in the chat. Okay. Anyone want to pick? Or I should pick it? Okay. I will show you a very nice thing in the self-terminals and self-service terminal services. The self-service terminals will show you, let's say, all types of teller machine, automated teller machines here in Jordan. Because in Jordan, we have ATMs, we have ITMs, we have even more advanced techie stuff that can print you a checkbook, that can give you a video calls with the support. It's completely an automated branch, actually. It's not simply ATM or ITM. But one of the, what I want to show you, for example, I have showed you something called Jordan Open Finance Repository. If you can see here, this is the complex type, simple type model. So, for example, if it said, this is our Jordan Open Finance complex type repository. So, for example, the amount complex type, the address complex type, the names, the accounts, the working hours, institution basic info, all of those data structures are the same between and shared between all APIs of the Jordan Open Finance specifications. So from this API, you can see, maybe I can open it here, and this is a working environment. The startups can test that and they can see everything. On the data side, you can find if this is a working 24/7 self-service machine, because we have a very special case here. I believe that you have the same. For example, we have some ATMs are inside shopping malls, and the shopping mall will close at 12 p.m. So it's not, when it comes to reality, it's not 24/7 because it's not accessible at that specific hour or a specific set of hours. We have accessibility features. The accessibility features are the set of features supported by that specific ATM. For example, if I'm a wheelchair user, I can inquire or check the nearest ATM that have a wheelchair access. If I need a Braille language supports ATM, I can check the nearest ATM that supports Braille language. It supports voice commands, supports colorblind. So for this specific list, we have utilized the UN list of disabilities supported by the buildings or such services. For example, we have the currencies. We have, because in Jordan here we have ATMs that can support US dollars, euros, and Jordanian dinars. So you can inquire about the nearest ATM that can give you dollars, for example. We have default fee ID. This is very weird. This is a very, let's say, Jordanian implementation. Some of the financial institutions here in Jordan have a direct relationship and agreements between themselves, so they have a preferred price on the fees, and the customers needs to know that better to reach the ATM. So you might search for the ATMs that will be free for you For example, how I can do that? That's why we have a default fee ID. You will check the, let's say, default ATM, ITM, or self-service terminals fees, but you can also check the specialized price for your institution with many others. For example, languages, working hours, maximum withdrawal, minimum withdrawal, and all of that. If you need to check anything else, I would be happy to do that, but I should stop here or what? I believe that we have finished or we have passed the time, right?
Yeah, we've passed the time.
I have a single question, Abdallah, and then I'll let you go. Do you have user data for these APIs? Like, do you know how much they're being used?
The APIs, yes, we do. Because this
Anything
is
you can share publicly with the class?
For the utilization of the APIs from our sandbox?
Yeah.
I can share it with you, not publicly. It's a little bit.
Okay, yeah. That's right. Because I'm really curious, like the ATM one, right?
Mhm.
The ATM one is a very specific use case. And
Yes.
I know the ATM API, you put in a lot of work into it. And I'm
Yes, we
curious
have
to
done.
see, like, what's the rate of usage? Is it like 5 companies who use it, I don't know, 1 million times? Or is it 100 fintechs that use it like 10,000 times, type like that? I'm really curious to see the usage data.
Of course. I will Sunday morning, I will send it for you.